All right, everybody, welcome to summer. We're going to go ahead and get started. I know it's a really busy season, and we are recording this webinar for those that can't make it today. But welcome to your FPC Seasonal Summer Symposium, Staycation Advocacy, How to Utilize In-State Strategies to Connect with Lawmakers. Now, I am Victoria Givens, your mother hen and manager of Realtor Mobilization Programs at NAR. If we haven't met, I look forward to meeting you at the annual conference in Boston or sooner. We're going to talk through today a few basics. Think of this as a primer on your August recess meetings, okay? We are going to have a much more in-depth webinar closer to August, but this is going to give you the tools in your toolbox to really get prepared for those meetings, and know that you all should probably be starting to schedule those meetings right now. We are going to go ahead and get started here with those talking points. Now, most of those talking points that you all had in your May meetings on the Hill, which were a huge success. I mean, we met with 98% of offices when we had our realtor legislative meetings in May. June is home ownership month. I think that's something to drive home with your members of Congress, giving them all of the research and tools in your toolbox in your FPC resources page. We have uploaded a lot of new kind of social media apps and things like that you all can share the home ownership month details with them. And we want to keep focused on these tax laws and tax bills that are going to really help us drive up inventory and increase this fair housing and equal access to professional representation. Okay, this is nothing new. We have a few bills that have been introduced that we'll talk about going into the August recess. We may also be dealing with the Department of Labor independent contractor issue and some other smaller bills that are being introduced right now by some of your members of Congress that we find really palatable and helpful. So we'll go through a little bit of that. But the main thing that I really want to drive home today before I turn it over to Brad Fitch and his group to run the most of this symposium is the Congressional Real Estate Caucus. Now, this is the latest list as of yesterday. If you don't see your member of Congress on this list, this is going to be your biggest ask this summer. Talk to them about it. In your FPC resources page, there is a nice little card that you all will remember from your meetings during RLM that conveys what the Real Estate Caucus is and why we want people to join. And essentially the message there is, right, we are building a bipartisan troop on Capitol Hill to represent our interest in private property rights when things come up in, I mean, next year is going to be the year of tax reform, right? In the new Congress, it's basically saying we all are on the same page and we recognize that real estate is a cornerstone of the American economy and a really important part of moving this into this next chapter of policy and securing private property rights for Americans, right? And everybody on this caucus, I think what you'll notice in today's FPC newsletter that goes out, we have the definition of what a caucus is, and many members of Congress join these caucuses in the House to really hone in on a passionate interest, right? There are several of them on various things, and this one is on real estate. So we want to make sure that as many, now these are members of the House. You're not going to be able to ask your senator to join the Congressional Real Estate Caucus. That's one thing that actually we came up this week. Now they can know that you're supportive of it, but caucuses don't really exist in the Senate as much as they do in the House. But you can let them know what we're doing and make sure that they're supportive. So go ahead and take a look at this list. And if your member's not on it, make sure that you connect with them this summer and ask them to join, because we want to go into 2025 with a really secure bipartisan group that is behind us, the wind at our back as we push forward some of these policy issues and asks that we're going to be doing. And these guys will also be there to protect us against any I don't want to say bad actors, but unfortunate pieces of legislation that might come our way. Having the larger the bipartisan caucus we build, the more protected we are and the more successful we will be in the year to come, right? So moving on, this is not anything new that you all have not seen since May, but I just wanted to go ahead and say that the co-sponsor More Homes on the Market Act is ask number 1. To co-sponsor the Neighborhood Homes Investment Act is number 2. We had our most recent co-sponsor was Congressman Stansberry, so yay for that, Rep. Stansberry. And also that was the latest action this week with Stansberry co-sponsoring 2 of our inventory and supply bills. And I just wanted to make note of that because what I think we're going to do is start doing these shout outs with members of Congress, and 2 in 1 week is a really awesome thing to do. So I really also had a really nice time in New Mexico earlier this week with the FPCs there, a New Mexico member of Congress, sponsoring some of our bills and doing an FPC training. Thank you guys for having me. I just want to take a minute to say that. But Affordable Housing Credit Improvement Act and these 1031 like-kind exchanges and increasing the $10,000 cap. I mean, these are the things that we want to be focused on in the summer. We're going to whittle down a little bit closer to a few more bills as we get closer to August, but just keep these in your back pocket, okay? I want to also applaud everybody for the great work that you guys did in May, making sure that veterans have access to professional representation. We beat that drum hard and fast, and they responded, right? We, if you missed it, we welcomed the announcement last week that they have a temporary policy allowing veterans to be compensated and compensate their realtor agent directly, right? That is a huge win, and we're really working on making that permanent. Now, the latest thing that happened was yesterday, HR 8647, which is the person carrying the water on that is Congressman Van Orden. Yay, freshman FPCs doing their amazing work with this. It was marked up yesterday positively in subcommittee, right? So that's really all you need to know for now, but it is moving. This bill is trying to make that temporary stay permanent, right? To make sure that veterans are able to hire their realtors with their loan. Okay, so keep that in mind. That is in your FPC app. You'll be able to track that bill as much as you want and make sure that your members of Congress know that that's what we're looking to do. Okay, that's the newest thing that you haven't heard. Now, one thing I want to just pepper in here is in your FPC reports, as you go into August recess, we want to know what's happening in, whether it's in New Mexico, which while we're on topic with our lovely congressman in New Mexico, or if it's in Texas, California, Florida, what's the temperature there? What besides inventory is bothering your member of Congress? We want to know when you go into these August recess meetings, we put out a survey in town, in the various states. These are the things that percolated and boiled up to the top: cost of insurance, zoning, land use reform. Are these the things that your members of Congress are losing sleep over? If so, we want to know about it because that's going to help us develop our policy moving forward. So as much as you are telling them what we care about, we want you all to be asking them, what else are they caring about, and what can we do moving into the next cycle to ameliorate some of those things giving your members of Congress heartburn. Now, a few things to just run through here before I turn it over to Brad is saving the date. For those of you that know you're absolutely returning as FPCs, save the date for Advocacy Week. That's going to be in Washington, D.C., and it's combining for the first time in a really long time. We used to do this a long time ago, but it's combining FPC training. This is for all veteran FPCs and freshman FPCs with Realtor Party Training Conference, Public Policy Coordinating Committee Conference, and Policy Forum. So it's a really exciting several days. You'll fly in on the 22nd and you'll fly out on the 25th, with most of those trainings being on the 23rd and the 24th. We go all the way till 5:30 on the 24th. So go ahead and book your flights accordingly. Don't try and book your hotel room, because that will come up through the registration process, okay? And the hotel will be blocked if you try and book the Hyatt. Don't try and book any other hotels. This entire conference is covered, so you all will just do a member expense report and file that. But we take FPC training very, very seriously. So start planning that now and know that you will be reimbursed for this trip. Now, making a quick plug here for our new podcast, The Advocacy Scoop. If you guys have not gotten a chance to listen to it, go ahead and wherever you get your podcast, listen to Shannon McGann and Patrick Newton really turn over a lot of these issues. What we're doing in the on the lobbying team, in the policy group, and what NAR is up to advocacy wise, which you'll see a lot of in today's FPC newsletter when it comes out later this afternoon, what we've been up to for Home Ownership Month and looking out to the summer. This is really where you want to tune in as you get closer to August recess. We're going to be talking about some of these newer bills and things that you have not maybe yet been so familiar with up until now. And after today's training, we have built an FPC trivia game, which, as you guys know now, the treat is if you win, or if you're in the top 3, you get a $50 gift card to the Realtor store, and you can get yourself a super cute Yeti or a hoodie or something like that if you guys place in the top 3. So go ahead and play after today's meeting. I am going to stop my share, Brad, and turn it over to Brad Fitch from the Congressional Management Foundation to continue on with staycation advocacy. Take it away, Brad.
Thank you very much, Victoria. And I'm really bummed that I can't play the game because I helped design it. So I kind of know the answers ahead of time. But it's a great game. And I really encourage all of you to use the One Huddle app. It's a lot of fun. And the research on using gamification in training is unequivocal. It's going to make your experience much more robust and make the training a lot stickier, much more likely for you to retain this. As Victoria said, my name is Brad Fitch. I'm president and CEO of the Congressional Management Foundation. We're a nonpartisan nonprofit group you've seen before that does, in addition to trainings, we also train congressional offices on how to have a better relationship and understanding of what their constituents are doing. We train citizen advocates like yourselves. More than 108,000 Americans have participated in our program. Our theory of change as a nonprofit organization is if we have a more engaged citizenry and we have a better Congress, we'll have a stronger democracy. And one of the key components of an advanced advocacy program is a local component. Those organizations that do the one and done fly-ins are much less likely to be successful at advancing their legislative strategy. Those that have a local component that recognize that boots on the ground, interacting with lawmakers back home is an essential part of advocacy. They're the ones that build the relationships and, frankly, allow the members of Congress to have a better understanding of the issues because they're seeing it in their own backyards. And members love these types of things. You know, they'll look for opportunities for photo ops. Like here's one of my favorite ones with Senator Murkowski. I will point out, if you are getting a photo op with a United States Senator, do not make it look like there are green antlers coming out of her head. So be a little aware of your, posing there. They love going into like real estate properties that are difficult to get to. And so you need a vehicle like this. This is my favorite photo. Anytime you can get a dog in a photo, please do it with a member of Congress. Old people and kids, second and third, but the dog is the best part. And that is, I'm speaking as a former recovering press secretary on Capitol Hill. So what are we going to talk about here today? Well, first, we want to talk a little bit about what members of Congress actually do back home. The Congressional Management Foundation has been surveying congressional staff for over 20 years, examining what works and what doesn't work with citizen engagement. And we've got a lot of great research from the members and from staff on how they spend their time back home, how to build relationships back home. What are those strategies that don't require you to come to Washington? We want you to come to Washington. We want to see you in January of 25. But as I just said, it's essential that you also have a back home strategy. What are some of those tactics and methods that you can employ to ensure you are an effective advocate back home? We'll be using comments and from legislators and staff, some videos as well to back up our research so you have a much more robust understanding of what works and what doesn't work. Well, first, let's talk a little bit about members back home. Oh, by the way, administrative note, go ahead and drop your questions in the chat throughout the program. I promise I'll get done by 2 o'clock Eastern time. We've never made anybody late. We might be done a little early if we can. Nobody's ever complained to me about getting done with a webinar early. But if you have any questions, go ahead and drop them into the chat. Well, first of all, let me break up some of the myths about members. Now, many of you, as your FPCs, you've gotten to know your member of Congress a little bit, and you realize that it's not like they're portrayed on television or in the mainstream media. Most of them are decent public servants trying to do a good job for their constituents. Let me back that up with a little data. A few years ago, the Congressional Management Foundation did a survey with members of the House of Representatives. These are actual House members responding to our survey. And we asked them what were the most important job aspects to them as a legislator. And this is what we found out. In significant numbers, they thought staying in touch with constituents, feeling you are performing an important public service, feeling invested in the work you're doing, and understanding how your job contributes to a society as a whole. You may understand or think that your individual member has that attitude and follows all of these qualities. I'm here to tell you that nearly all members of Congress also feel the same way based on this quantitative data we got from members of the House of Representatives. Now, let me paraphrase. I'm not saying they're all saints, okay? And we do have a particularly loud, vocal, and small group of members of Congress that probably aren't going to score as high on this. And you may think this is new to the House of Representatives and the Senate. It's not. We have always had a bit of a crazy caucus in Washington, D.C. They just didn't have Twitter before. And that's the big differentiator. I mean, I could point to you members of Congress from the 1960s, 70s, and 80s who you would not identify with and you would not agree with, and you would think, how the hell did that guy get elected? And it was usually guys. And I'm saying that that's been around for a while. Most of the people you interact with are going to want to interact with you. And there's a lot more opportunities back home to do that. Around 2011, when John Boehner took over as Speaker of the House of Representatives, he dramatically changed the recess schedule and the congressional schedule. And the Democrats and Republicans have both kept that system going, where they have many more recesses, and they also have clear schedules on when they're going to be voting. If they, like they said today, said you're going to be done voting at 11:30 in the morning, they're almost always on time. I got to tell you, folks, as a staffer who worked on the Hill and worked with the Congress in the 80s and 90s and early 2000s, that never used to happen. So they're back home a lot more frequently. And you can look at the congressional schedule, literally just Google House schedule or House Majority Leader schedule. You will get a PDF of when they are back home, and you can pretty much bank on it, except at the end of the year. Sometimes when they get close to December and Christmas time, they will probably lose their schedule discipline a little bit because they've got to get must-pass bills done by Christmas. Technically, they're supposed to get the bills done by the end of the fiscal year, which is October 1st. The last time that happened was 1997. So don't count on that. And that's why we always have potential government shutdowns towards the end of September and early October. Most of the time, thank heavens, we don't do the shutdowns. But anyway, this schedule is a pretty clear schedule. We're right now wrapping up a session of Congress today, and they're now going on a 4th of July recess. It's too late to ask for a meeting for the 4th of July recess. Their schedules are usually settled 2 to 3 weeks in advance. It is a near perfect time to ask for a meeting during the August recess. And we're going to show you that in a minute on how far out in advance you can schedule things. And keep in mind, again, a lot of people get kind of obsessed with DC and think that's where all the action is. We did a survey of senior congressional staff, and we asked them to fill in the blanks to this question. Our member of Congress prefers to have meetings with constituent groups where, and the winner is no preference at all. Only 13% said they preferred Washington, D.C. One staffer said this: nothing replaces face-to-face interacting with staff. It matters less whether the meeting is with state staff or DC staff, and more important that we can sit down and talk with someone. So as you can see here, members and staffers are saying they want these in-person interactions. And this, we think, grew a little bit more in the post-pandemic era, and they are more likely to have in-state meetings. And the reason is members of Congress started opening up their district offices in 21 and 22. During those years, the Capitol campus was still closed by and large. You could schedule meetings, but you had to be escorted. There was just a mess. It was not good until January 23 when everything opened up. The point is they're used to having more meetings back in the district. Let me continue on with this research on what members of Congress actually do with their time when they're in Washington and, most importantly, back home. Let's go back to that survey we did of members of the House of Representatives, where we asked them, how do you spend your time? And what we found is when they're in Washington, the plurality of their time is on what you would want them focused on: going to committee hearings, going to bill votes on the floor, going to other meetings with other lawmakers to talk about legislation. It's not campaign activity, it is legislative activity. And when they're back home, the plurality of their time at 32% is interacting with constituents. They're looking for opportunities to get photo ops, to learn with boots on the ground the impact of the decisions that they are making. They like going out of the office. It's just something that frankly, most members of Congress, they would much rather be in their home district, interacting with constituents, learning about an issue someplace out of the office as opposed to being in Washington, D.C. Now, let me also point out that they have a lot of time to engage in these activities. In the same survey, we asked members of Congress how many hours per week they are working. 59 hours a week when they're back home. I remember, I'll give you one anecdote. I talked about how the schedule changed in 2011. And I got contacted by one of our congressional clients towards the end of that year. And they asked me can we get a cup of coffee in one of the House cafeterias? Now, when a chief of staff in the House of Representatives asks me out for a cup of coffee, it's not good, right? There's something that's wrong in the office that they need to talk to me about. And the chief said to me, my boss is really unhappy with the district schedule. And I said, wait, I did a retreat with you guys last year. Everything was fine. He said, yeah, but we have so much more time in the district. My district director can't fill it up with enough interesting things. And he's upset that he feels like he's wasting his time. That's the focus of members of Congress. They want you to set up interesting meetings or interesting site visits. This is what they live for. And contrasting with 30 or 40 years ago, when members of Congress used to move their families to Washington, D.C., and they would spend time here a lot more. They now are going back and keeping their families home. In the same survey, we asked how many weekends do you spend in the congressional districts? And 8 out of 10 members said more than 40. I had a chance to meet the new member of Congress from Alaska, Mary Peltola, first Native American, by the way, Alaskan, who is elected to the United States Congress. And this was after she'd been in office about 4 months. And we hit it off because our kids are the exact same age, 17 to 15, and we were just talking about travel. And she was going home and had gone home to Alaska every single weekend since she got elected. I'm like, what? I don't even know what that is like to go back to Alaska, to commute from Alaska. I mean, every weekend. That's just crazy. Let me bring on one of our rock star staffers to talk a little bit about the importance of in-district meetings. We have this series that we run called Capitol Insider, where we interview congressional staffers and members of Congress, talking about different activities that happen in citizen engagement. And I'm going to play you this short video right now, which will amplify some of the points that I've made.
People oftentimes think that by scheduling a meeting in Washington, D.C., it adds importance. You will get a longer time with the member if you do it back home in the district, in the state. You'll have a better opportunity to visit with them because they're not going to be distracted by votes or staff or emails or phone calls. You're going to have dedicated time to take that meeting in the district. And if you bring somebody on site to show the impact of what your company, your business, your nonprofit, your food bank, whatever it is, what they're doing at home to affect your local community, and there are other people in the room that are your workers, your volunteers, your employees, whatever they are, and how they're impacted, and then to tie that to a specific policy or specific federal action that is impacting you, that member is going to pay attention. And the important part on my end is that we then communicate between the people in the district and the people in Washington, D.C. to make sure that action is taken.
Probably one of the best sound bites I've ever collected from a congressional staffer, and Charlie did a great job in summing up the benefits of engaging with lawmakers back home. Okay, so what are we talking about? What are some of the strategies to build relationships back home? Well, let's go back to our survey of congressional staff. And in one of the questions, we asked this: in your opinion, how important are the following for understanding constituent views and opinions? And what we found is, taking a look at all these strategies like town hall meetings, telephone town hall meetings, district state office hours, meetings with the members or senators, attending events in the district or state, meetings with staff and constituents. Look how many of these activities don't happen in Washington and that actually happen only back home. And we're going to talk about some of them in a minute in more detail to give you more information and more guidance on how to have effective town hall meetings or in-district meetings with the district staff and the state staff. First, let's talk a little bit about what motivates them and what they're looking for in meeting requests. One of the congressional staff survey questions we asked, and this was asked just of House district directors, so this is the senior person working in the district: which three of the following strategic factors are most important for determining whether your member will personally attend an event or meeting in the district or state? And this is the top three things they're looking for. They're looking for the number of constituents attending, the opportunity to advance the member's strategic goals, and the member's interest in the issue. Now, let me unpack each one of those. Number of constituents attending, we actually did a follow-up, and the magic number for a House number is like 7 or more. I remember some years ago, a district director told me the story. No, actually, got this wrong. It was a constituent who told me the story with the Farm Bureau. He was a farmer in Iowa, and he got a call on a Friday afternoon from the district director, who he knew, and said, "We've got a hole in our schedule tomorrow. Can my member of Congress come visit your farm, and can you bring in some of your neighbors to talk about the upcoming farm bill?" Now, the farmer was elated because this member was a subcommittee chairman in the agriculture committee, so a very powerful high up ag member. Member of Congress shows up for what was supposed to be a 30-minute meeting. There were 20 farmers there. He stayed there for 3 hours. Didn't make the district director happy because it blew up the schedule. But the point is, you had something that was connected to the member's goals. You had more than 7 or 8 people there, and the member clearly had an interest in the issue, or else he wouldn't have been on the agriculture committee, and he's representing Iowa. So you had a nice little trifecta there that captured all 3 of these factors to get the member there. So that's what you're looking at. And because you do have pending issues, you do have that connection, because your industry is so important to the local economy that members are going to pay attention. Now, let's take a look at the factors that they don't care about. They don't care if the member's been there previously, interacted with the group. In fact, they would rather, in many cases, interact with a group that they know who they are, that they're reliable in setting up an event. The worst thing you want if you're a scheduler is an invite from the National Association of I don't know who the hell you are. I mean, that you don't want that. It really doesn't matter whether it's informal or formal activities. And the bottom 3 is the number of VIPs attending. And let me just point out, for most congressional staff and members, they want to be the VIP. When I was a House staffer, the biggest, frankly, chewing out I would get is if I sent my boss to an event in the district or state, and I didn't know that the senator was going to be there. And the senator, of course, got all the limelight and got the attention and was the big muckety muck there. And my House member was just, and also ran. That's what they don't want. So one of the rules you have working with Congress, no surprises. That gets staffers in trouble, and frankly, it diminishes them in the eyes of that member of Congress. Let's talk about logistics and what they're looking for. One of the questions we ask congressional staff schedulers for each of the following activities: how many weeks in advance should the request be made for the member to personally participate. And this is what we found out. If you're doing a town hall meeting that has some degree of complexity, you got microphones, you got to set up chairs, that takes more than 6 weeks. The sweet spot for almost everything is 3 to 4 weeks. And I would say go on the 4-week end. When I was a communications director for a United States senator, 3 to 4 weeks before the recess, I'd have a conference call, pre-Zoom, with the state director, the state scheduler, and myself, and maybe someone from the legislative staff. And we would start planning the recess. And we always start this way. What is the photo that we want? And then we plan backwards and we say, okay, we want to focus on juvenile crime in Rochester. And we know that there is a facility there that is a YMCA that's doing great work with young people to keep them off the streets and to get them focused on, job skills and things like that. Great. We'll go to Rochester then, get that photo up, and then you go to the schedule and say, okay, are there any other people in Rochester that have asked to see the senator? You see how it works? They plan backwards, but it's always 3 to 4 weeks out. They will keep a folder of all pending requests. And we'll talk a little bit about what are some of the things in the sort of the magic asks when you're requesting a meeting with a member of Congress. One staffer said this, or actually the member said this: the most effective way to influence a lawmaker is for a constituent to talk to a legislator about how the policy will affect the person or a particular group. And one of the best ways to do that is setting up meetings in the district or state with senior staffers. It could be a district director, it could be a regional director for a United States senator, or it can be a caseworker or outreach person, sometimes called a field representative. But getting to know those staffers is really very, very important. A couple of tips we got for scheduling those meetings. One staffer said to us, be gracious and look for common ground, meaning look for times that are going to be convenient for you. Highlight opportunities to mix with constituents, employees, members, rather than stage presentations. Who are they going to be interacting with? Who's the photo with is what I was always interested in, whether the member of Congress was going to have their class a good photo that I could use in the future, where he wasn't wearing a suit and tie sitting in front of a podium with a bunch of other politicians. That's what they're looking for, something very real. When you're having the in-state meetings, keep in mind, it could be in the member's office or another convenient location. Every district office in the House of Representatives has convenient conference rooms where they can fit usually between 5 and 8 people. Definitely U.S. Senator offices have those. They last longer, as you heard Charlie say. They can be 30 to 60 minutes long as opposed to a 20-minute meeting in Washington, D.C. They may have the legislative staffer phone in and listen in to the conversation if you're talking about pending legislation. And they usually will have someone from the district who's there. And that's going to keep in mind, that's another really good opportunity. Let me kind of do a little sidebar here for a second, because I often get asked about virtual meetings. And is it good to do virtual meetings? And the answer is yes. Adding virtual to a citizen advocate's toolkit is frankly the most significant advancement in citizen advocacy since the invention of email. That's how big a deal it is. And in our last survey of congressional staff in late 2023, we asked, when comparing your constituent meetings that are held in person to those that are held virtually and online, which format do you think is better for achieving the following? And what we found is they felt that virtual meetings may be more efficient, but that in-person meetings are more effective. And the reason I point this out is because, when in between your Washington visits and in between setting up meetings in the district or state, it is a good idea to have that virtual connection with the staff member or the member of Congress. But our research shows that for building relationships, for higher quality meetings, staff do want it to be in person. Well, let me continue on with this research to show what strategies work and what don't work. One of the questions we asked in one of our latest surveys, one of my favorite questions we asked, went like this. In thinking about constituents and the group that represent them, what should they do more of or less of to build better relationships with your office and your member or senator? Now, see how this question is different than the ones we've asked before? We're asking about relationship building. Now, the reason we built this question was because previous research had showed that those groups that build relationships are more effective in the advocacy effort. So we're saying, okay, if that's true, what should they do to build better relationships? And this is what we found out. We found that, getting to know the chief of staff, scheduler, videos, scorecards, that's not going to do it. What really starts moving the needle is in-district meetings and meetings in Washington. And please note that for relationship buildings, in-district meetings scored higher than Washington meetings. Another reason why we encourage you to go out and build relationships in the district office. Get to know that district director. The reason you want to get to know them is they usually are the top political advisor if they're the district director, and frankly, they're the member's best friend often back home. When a member of Congress is picking out their Washington chief of staff, they're asking themselves, who knows the committee system? Who has relationships in Congress already that I can leverage? When they're asking themselves who they want as their district director, they ask themselves, who do I want to be stuck with on the New York Thruway when I'm driving from Albany to Syracuse in a snowstorm? They pick their best friend. These people can become potential champions for your cause. They are conduits to the legislative staff. And as I said, they're usually the closest person. They're also the person with the most longevity usually in the office compared to a legislative assistant. A legislative assistant average tenure is 1.7 years. The average tenure of a district director is 4 or 5 times that. And so that's really important to know. One district chief of staff said this: in-person meetings are easiest for staff to understand an issue because it gives us a chance to ask questions and put a face with an issue. Let me finish out the chart because I didn't show you the top answers on the chart. One of the big answers we got, 62% said, get to know the district director, provide materials in advance, get to know the legislative assistant, and show materials of the impact on the district or state. Now, NAR already has provided you with outstanding handouts, leave behinds, or we sometimes call them read aheads, that you can send to offices. But I want to focus on this district director position for a second because people often overlook the value of building a relationship with this key person. They're all focused on the legislative assistant and not the district director. So let me give you a photograph that illustrates how important this is. This woman with the purple hair is Congresswoman Rosa DeLauro of New Haven, Connecticut. The reason I highlight her, she is the once and possibly future chair of the most powerful committees in the Congress, the House Appropriations Committee. She represents New Haven, Connecticut, and she has been there for over 3 decades, as has this person right here, Jen Lamb, who has been the district director for 32 years. Now, if there's anybody on this call who is either from Oklahoma City or New Haven, Connecticut, you're the most important people in the room right now, because right now, Oklahoma City is represented by Tom Cole, the new chairman of the House Appropriations Committee. He got it because Kay Granger from Fort Worth, Texas, stepped down. If there's somebody from Fort Worth on the call, I'm really sorry to report that. But, excuse me, I got a summer cold. It's important to get to know these district directors because they often stay for a very, very long time. And they are determinants in what the member does in the district. Let me give you a quote from one district director from one of our surveys. If they are friendly, even if we don't agree with them, I will approve the meeting with the congressman. Notice the key sentence here. I will approve the meeting. The one person who has absolutely no say in their schedule is the United States Senator or member of the House of Representatives, or for that matter, state lawmakers. Their schedule is set by their staff. We literally, for the district, we would give the senator or the House member, this is what you're going to do from 8 o'clock in the morning to 6 o'clock at night. They'd grumble. They wouldn't like something. They wanted something changed, but it couldn't be. It's too late. This is why you want to build those relationships with the state director. Another strategy that you can employ, which is incredibly helpful, is attending town hall meetings. Members of Congress, some, are going back to in-person town hall meetings. I'll give you just a couple members that I know that do these really well. Sean Casten of Illinois is a king at town hall meetings. Senator Chuck Grassley of Iowa does a town hall meeting in all 99 counties every year in every county. It's actually called the Full Grassley. And when presidential candidates want to come to Iowa, they literally study from the town hall meeting playbook that's been written by Chuck Grassley, who's been in office for decades. And he still does it. And he's still doing pretty well. He's one of our finalists for a Democracy Award for constituent accessibility, because he's always accessible, as is Sean Casten, as is Mark DeSaulnay of San Francisco. A lot of members are doing these in-person meetings. And here's some tips if you do get to go to an in-person meeting for a member of Congress. And I'm basing this on my experience. not just our research. When I started on Capitol Hill as a press secretary, my boss represented a district that was right outside of the DC area, Anne Arundel County, Maryland, which is encompasses Annapolis and basically everything from the Beltway to the Chesapeake Bay. And during that time, because I was his press secretary, I went to over 100 town hall meetings with my member of Congress. I learned firsthand. It was like a graduate school in political education. And this is what I learned. I learned that people who went prepared were more effective advocates. Now, that sounds silly, but of course, if you've had time to study your issues, study your talking points, practice it, you're going to come off better. Go a little early and meet the staff. In every one of these meetings, there will be a district director setting up tables, maybe putting out, notepads and cards for people to write their questions on. Go 5 minutes early. Tell them you're going to ask a question. Tell them what the question is. They'll make sure that you get your question asked. If you can bring a couple people with you, a couple other real estate agents with you, that's going to be even better, because nothing says listen to me like a small group of people to a member of Congress. Leave paper. I know this sounds like a gimmick. I was interviewing a member of Congress for a book I wrote some years ago on citizen engagement, and I was asking him about town hall meetings. And I said, what do you get out of town hall meetings? And he went over to his desk and he pulled out a piece of paper and he showed me it. He said, well, I get stuff like this. I was at this town hall meeting last week and this gentleman left me these talking points. And I asked him sheepishly, I said, what are you going to do with those talking points? He said, well, I'm going to give them after this meeting to the senior legislative assistant who handles that issue, and ask that legislative assistant to call that constituent and answer his questions. There were 50 people at that town hall meeting. One of them built a relationship with the senior legislative assistant who covers that issue because he brought a piece of paper. I know it sounds like a gimmick. It works. Provide feedback to your professional advocate. You guys do a better job of that than almost any trade association we work with, but I do have to emphasize it. Victoria's paying me to say this. They need your forms. They need that feedback to know. I can tell you how important it is. I mean, when I was a chief of staff and I had a lobbyist come to me and say something like, at that town hall meeting in Annapolis, the congressman was asked whether they were going to co-sponsor our bill, and he said he would get back to that constituent. That was 3 weeks ago. What do you want me to tell that constituent? I would be shaking in my boots if I knew there was that level of coordination. And that's a good thing. You want your staffers to know that both the constituent and the lobbyist are going to hold that lawmaker accountable. They can't do that unless you fill in that form and give them that feedback. Now, a new development that's happened in the last 10 years is the use of telephone town hall meetings. I'm always impressed when I'm in a group of real estate realtors and I ask them, how many of you have been to a telephone town hall meeting? Your group usually has a higher percentage of people, sometimes like between 20 and 30%. Most groups, it's like 1 or 2%. So keep it up. Keep going to these telephone town hall meetings. They're a great opportunity for you to get your member of Congress on the record. The number of people in a telephone town hall meeting averages between 3,000 and 5,000 people. In 2021, the total number of Americans that participated in a telephone town hall meeting with a member of Congress, 3 million Americans. And what our research has done, we've done research with Ohio State University and the University of California on the power of telephone town hall meetings to improve trust in government, to increase civic education and civic engagement. It's off the charts. It's really good. Let me bring on another one of our rock star members of Congress this time to talk about telephone town hall meetings through our Capitol Insider series.
Traditional town hall meeting, it's a success if you've got a couple of hundred people showing up. We just did a telephone town hall a couple of days ago, this past week, and we had almost 6,000 people on the line. I mean, 6,000 people in an hour that you're able to touch with, almost, 800 or 900 people on consistently over that entire time. So I think it really is a new great tool of being able to reach out and succinctly, quickly, yet very effectively get to people. People push 0 to ask their question. My staff is in there fielding those questions, and oftentimes there'll be a concern about a casework, something that's happening with people or a piece of legislation. We'll allow them to sort of handle that, and then they give us a little synopsis, And I don't just go for the softballs. I take the tough ones. You know, I want to hear the critical ones, not just for my benefit, I think, but for others who are on the line, who, you know, aren't maybe sure who is this guy, you know, especially as a freshman. You know, they're trying to figure out what I'm about. And I think it's important that that I answer not just the ones that I agree with philosophically, but that I allow those who disagree with me philosophically to have a run at me too.
So the volume was a little loud, but I hope you all turned up the volume and heard that from Congressman Hunzinger talking about telephone town hall meetings. Let me give you some tips because this is a relatively new type of form of citizen engagement. First, try to get invited. Our research shows that most members of Congress will invite anyone who signs up for their e-newsletter. And by the way, as an FPC, you should be signed up for the e-newsletter anyway, because it's a great way to hold your lawmaker accountable, but you also will learn about upcoming telephone town hall meetings. Always ask a question. The way the format works is you go on the call, you'll get, first of all, you probably will get called in the night around 7 o'clock. Hi, I'm Congressman Smith. I'm having a telephone town hall meeting. Please press 1 to participate or just stay on the line. If you want to ask a question, press and they'll give you a number. Always ask a question. Keep in mind, you're in front of a big audience. They can only take about 10 questions in a 1-hour period. So try to get that question asked. Be prepared to have your question vetted. If you haven't been in one of these, the way it works is you'll be listening to the member of Congress answer a question, and then the phone line will go dead. You've not been cut off. A second or two later, you'll hear someone talking to you. Hi, I'm Brad. I'm with the Congressman's office. And they'll ask you 3 questions. What's your name? Where are you from? And what question you want to ask. They're not trying to censor you. They want to make sure you're not going to swear or issue a death threat in front of thousands of people. So they will vet your question. Realize you're on a very big stage and always establish your credentials. Please, please, please tell them you're a realtor. They will instantly connect. Oh, we're going to be talking about flood insurance, or we're going to be talking about tax issues. They instantly get your world and they'll be better prepared to answer it. Talk from a written question. In between the time that you hit the button to ask a question and you actually get to ask your question, you're going to have maybe 5, 10, 20 minutes. Just write down your question in advance. And please praise the lawmaker for listening. Most members of Congress, constituents show, don't think that the member's listening. It's always a good idea to frankly just praise that lawmaker. Final set of advice I want to give you is site visits. As I said a couple of times during this broadcast, nothing is better and nothing is more desirable than a great photo op with a site visit with a member of Congress. And they'll likely become your champion, putting it on their website or they're retweeting it. I mean, you get a site visit photograph with Chuck Grassley and he retweets it. You just connected with 3 million people. Cory Booker, it's like 4 million people. So always look for those opportunities for a site visit. When we ask congressional staff, when your member is trying to be visible throughout the district, how important are the following activities? 95% of congressional staff said site visits were important or very important. I have no idea who that 4% is. They're nuts. But site visits are key for members of Congress. One staffer or another, just to demonstrate the value of these site visits, one of the things we wanted to know is how frequently they did them. And we asked that in our survey, approximately, how often does your member personally participate in the district?
Democratic governors of America and the.
Could we get someone to mute that? Someone is listening to another thing. If we can mute that, that would be great. Thank you. So as you can see here, that in a weekly and monthly basis.
If I walk away right now, the only place would be.
Thank you. As you see, they're frequently doing these site visits on a regular basis. One staffer said this: my member does not like sitting in an office. He prefers to be out there in the district, meeting with constituents in their own venue. He gains insights to their issues, challenges, and needs by being present on the ground. The last area I'm going to give you some advice on in terms of a tactic is social media. We all know that Facebook is going the way of the dodo bird. Nobody under the ages of 21 even uses Facebook, but members of Congress are not under the age of 21. They all are on Facebook, Twitter, and a majority of them are on Instagram. So these are really valuable ways to connect with lawmakers, and you don't need to get that many people to do it. One of the survey questions we asked congressional staff went like this: how many similar comments on a social media post is enough for your office to pay attention to? And what we found is less than 30. So if you get a couple of your friends to send the same tweet to a member of Congress around the same time, and that's very important tactical advice there. If you send 10 tweets over 10 months, they're not going to notice it. If you send 10 tweets over 10 hours, or better yet, 10 minutes, you're going to get their attention. But it also matters who you are. A follow-up question we asked went like this. If your member has not arrived at a firm decision on an issue, how much influence might social media posts directed to your office, including posts on your office or member platforms, from the following have on his or her decision? And what we found is if it's somebody with unclear constituent status, they're not going to pay much attention to that person. The minute they identify themselves as a constituent, 7 out of 10 staffers would say they have some or a lot of influence, leader or representative of a group. Again, if you identify yourself as an FPC with the NAR, as a realtor, it's going to clearly get their attention according to the survey. And if multiple people affiliated with a group tweet in, that is going to have get their attention. Okay, last logistical advice I'm going to give you is on making scheduling requests. When you put in a request for a meeting, we often are asked, how long should I wait until I follow up with that particular request? Well, we actually have an answer to you to this question. Generally, how quickly does your office take to respond to a request for a meeting with the member or senator? And the magic spot, as you can see, is 1 to 2 weeks. If it goes more than 2 weeks, you are perfectly within your right to call the office, ask for the scheduler, tell the people at the front desk, I put a scheduling request in with the member of Congress. You can often do it through a website form that you fill out. And if you don't hear within 2 weeks, please reach out to that office again. They're not intentionally blowing you off. They're getting hundreds of requests. It just got lost in the shuffle somehow. And it does make a really good difference when you do that follow-up. Some final tips before I go to the Q&A section, some do's and don'ts from the research we did with Congress. One staffer said, focus on the big picture, but don't forget the tiny details. That's helpful. Constituent groups should always allow the congressional office to determine the time they will meet with the member instead of dictating the best time frame for them. So when you say sometime during the August recess, can I come in with some other people in my industry and talk to you about these issues? You will get a meeting. A couple more do's and don'ts, and this is more in the don't category. Note last minute requests. Note nag. They don't like nagging. You got to call like 5 or 6 times to be classified as a nag. 2 or 3 times, no, you're just being persistent. Requesting meetings before you have the attendees' names and their hometowns and their topics. If a staffer asks you who's attending and you say, I don't know, that is a red flag for that scheduler. They're not going to do a follow-up question there. One district director said this, I become very wary of groups who won't specify how many people will be attending the meeting. With that, I'll give you one final quote before I stop sharing my screen, which I always do, from Thomas Jefferson, that we in America do not have a government by the majority. We have a government by the majority who participate. I appreciate your participation in this process. And I'm going to go ahead and open up the chat box and see what kind of questions we have, because I see that we got 7 chats, and hopefully those questions I can answer. So I'll go to the top of the chat one. And it looks like they're all from Victoria. Oh, Fort Worth was there. Sorry, Fort Worth. Okay, it was great. I did a retreat. I came to Fort Worth. Oh my gosh, just Tex-Mex out of the world food. Great. So we've got some logistical comments here. We will get a copy of this presentation to y'all and the PowerPoint as well. Victoria will get a copy of that. Does anybody have any additional questions? You want to raise your hand or ask a question just from your location right now?
I'll go.
Yeah.
All right. So what would be your advice on how to handle a meeting in August when we have the same material from 3 months later that we just talked to them about?
Well, one, I'd emphasize something different than you emphasized before, and hopefully there should be some accountability here. You asked them 3 months to co-sponsor a bill. What's happened? You know, why hasn't it happened? Secondly, if you did meet with them 3 months earlier, you say that you met with them. Are there other people you can bring into the room in the district that didn't meet with them? Politicians love making friends. You know, that's one more voter they're going to talk with. So bring in people they didn't meet, and that will attract them. If you say, I know I met with the lawmaker. Some of my colleagues want the opportunity to meet with the congresswoman and talk about the issues in their community, which may be a little different than your community. So go ahead and invite other people. And then if you could mix in some photo op, and it doesn't have to be long, just say you want 20 minutes. That one little touch is just gold. It's really valuable.
Thank you.
One thing, Jeff, that I'll just add to that, I think that's a really great question. We are going to be, just to clarify, we're going to be sending you all more fine-tuned talking points than what we wanted y'all to really focus on the strategy and tactics of the meeting and getting the meeting and what's going to make a successful meeting on this webinar. And as we get closer, we are going to send a few more talking points. Look for that mid-July, maybe last week of July, right before we get into August. One thing that's new that some of you that might have missed from the very first 5 minutes or so is we now have a bill number for that veterans bill, helping secure the right now temporary policy that you all were amazing in lobbying on in May, allowing veterans to have access to realtor representation and pay for that realtor representation. Right now, that's temporary. It's a win, but it's temporary. And the bill that just got marked up yesterday is going to continue to move this summer and move this fall. And that's something to really focus on, because I really feel like a lot of your members of Congress helped sink their teeth into that issue and felt really passionately about supporting us there. And now we have a bill number that will really shore up that. Now, of course, you all know we can't make the administration do anything, but Congress can speak quite loudly with this bill, if it gets passed, saying we need to make this permanent. So I would say that's the biggest change right now going into August, but then we'll also be looking at independent contractor issues and some other things, but we've really got to tweak the language. We met with the Department of Justice this morning. You're all going to get an email about that from Nikia, our CEO, later this afternoon. So a few things are happening right now that are going to lead to some more specific talking points right before the recess. But right now, keep thinking about what creative ways you guys can, creative people that you can get in the room, creative places that you can be, and other things that Brad talked about to making those meetings really special.
If
Thanks.
I may
Great
go
question, Jeff.
off topic for a second, and please, we have time for at least one or two more questions. I noticed that Victoria is going to be posting a letter template in the FPC resources section that you can use to send your member of Congress. I cannot emphasize enough how important it is to localize the top of that letter, not the bottom. They won't get to the bottom. Localize and personalize the top of that letter. Talk about how many agents in your district or state. What's the impact on the economy? Use the data that you have, provided by the NAR to localize that letter before you send it, or that email before you send it to your lawmaker.
That's right. And just to reiterate, that is the letter that you all can use, other than talking about it or texting about it, in an email, excuse me, inviting your member to join the real estate caucus and saying why it's important. Now, we already had that informational card in May that was just information on what it was. This is going one step further and helping you all vocalize that from the FPC position, right? And know that they can't just tell you. I think one thing that was really confusing coming out of, or not really confusing, but could kind of be misconstrued coming out of the meeting. Your member of Congress, we heard a lot of folks say, oh yeah, we're really interested in that. We want to join, we're joining. And then you all came back to us and said, oh, Congressman Smith is joining the real estate caucus. They told me so, but that's not exactly how it works. The process of joining any caucus in the House is they have to formally tell the co-chairs of the caucus, who I mentioned in the chat, that they would like to join. And there's a formal form between members of Congress and the House that they actually have to fill out and say, I'm actually joining this. They can't just say, I am what I am. So that is something that we did not clarify before. So. All right, everybody, if that is it, then we will definitely see you guys in Boston, if not before. And thank you for joining today. This webinar will be recorded. It will be in the newsletter. I will post it on the hub as well as the slides. And we'll see y'all soon. We'll have another Talking Points webinar probably right before the August recess. Thanks so much for joining today. Happy summer. Bye-bye.